This is a true story that happened to me long while ago when I was 10 years old. This story happened in a small town in the leafy suburbs north of New York City in Westchester County. It didn't happen at my house, but the house of one of my good friends at the time, about a walking block away from where I live. This is one of those towns in Westchester where there are huge suburban houses set among oak and maple trees. It was a safe neighborhood where I knew the owners of each house by name. The houses were generally quite large, with multiple floors and several bedrooms. The house where this scary story takes place was extra large. It was not the shining hotel large, but it was a large colonial house with 5 bedrooms on the second level. The family living there had 5 children ranging from 10 to the upper teenage years at that time. The night this happened was a dark and cold night. The parents were out with dinner plans that evening, and I was there visiting my friend Byron, who was also 10, and his older brother Jacob, who was 12. These are not the names in real life. It was just the 3 of us in one large house on a dark night during October. I knew this family quite well, so I felt very at home in their home. We were just goofing around that night, playing some games and watching TV. 3 kids in a large empty house. So this is where the night becomes creepy. The 3 of us were in the kitchen with the lights on bright. It was around 11:30 at night, so it was late, but not super late. The phone rang, and Jacob, acting as head of the household at 12 years old, answered, "Hello?" We then saw Jacob get a peculiar look on his face and hesitantly said, "Just a minute," and then did something a bit odd. He rested the phone down on the chair. This was one of those wall phones from the 1990s. I don't think people still use those in 2018. In any case, he put the phone down and just left it and walked upstairs. I remember thinking it was a strange thing to do, but still could have a reasonable explanation. I looked at Byron, and he also had a curious WTF type of expression on his face. We were quiet for a few seconds, and both our facial expressions showed signs that we thought this was peculiar and odd. In a few moments, Jacob is going to be running down the stairs, in a panic, screaming for us to get out immediately out of the house. But before we got to that part, here's what's happening upstairs. Jacob climbed the stairs and went into his parents' room, where there is a tabletop phone. This is one of those old corded phones where you pick up the receiver, hold it to your ear, not exactly an iPhone 10. And there was no way to know who was calling. Jacob picked up the phone and said, "Okay, I'm upstairs. What's up?" A few moments went by with dead silence, and Jacob asked, "Hello?" Then the voice came. It was calm but cold. "Jacob, there's a bomb inside your house, and it's going to blow any second now." Click. The other end had hung up. He dropped the phone and felt panic rush through his entire body. He ran out of the bedroom, down the stairs, and started screaming, "Get out of the house! There's a bomb in the house! There's a bomb in the house!" We saw Jacob at the bottom of the stairs running, and he did not waste any time heading straight through the foyer and outside down the stone path that leads away from the house and out onto the street. Byron and I ran in confused fury also. Jacob stopped running when he arrived at the other side of the street on the sidewalk. We looked across the street at this huge house, looking very eerie on the dark night. The house had several lights on, and the front door was open, and it was empty. There was no one around. The neighborhood was still and quiet. It was just us 3 kids, the oldest 12 years old, standing there on a cold October night, at almost midnight, scared out of our wits and waiting for the house to burst into fire. I was feeling chills through my body and chills on my skin from the dark, cold air. Our jackets were just in there, and we could just go get them so easily. But though the house could blow up at any second. Jacob explained what had happened on the phone call upstairs, and he thought it was his Uncle Jerry. But now he didn't think it was his Uncle Jerry. It was bizarre that the caller knew he answered on the ground floor and told him to go upstairs. How could he know this? We thought maybe he told Jacob to go upstairs so he wouldn't have enough time to get out of the house before the possible explosion. We stood there, we waited, we were scared, we were cold. We thought the large, boxy, empty, illuminated house on this dark night would soon be in flames, or that there was a chance it would be in flames. It never blew up, but we were still afraid to go inside, because maybe it would blow up then. Eventually we went to the neighbor's house. The father there didn't seem as scared as we were, but he did call the police. The police searched through the house, and Byron and Jacob's parents also arrived home. I see the whole thing was some kind of practical joke, a prank call. There was never a bomb. We never found out who made the call, and Jacob to the day still has no idea who it could have been, and still says that he at first thought it was a friendly call from their uncle. There are a few pranksters in the neighborhood. Actually, we're among the biggest pranksters in the neighborhood. Still, doesn't explain how the caller knew Jacob was on the downstairs phone and that there was another telephone upstairs. And further, it seems like the caller knew who he was speaking to. Who would do such a prank that is so sinister to a few vulnerable kids home alone on such a night?
It all started on the 14th night of March, the night my parents' 20th wedding anniversary. It was a wonderful sunny day, if memory serves, surprisingly warm for being the beginning of spring. The beautiful weather was perfect for the atmosphere of the day. Being married for 20 years is obviously a momentous occasion, so my parents had booked a table at our favorite Italian restaurant. Of course, this was a formal occasion, so I had my best suit on. It was 5:33, and I was just straightening my tie when my phone went off. I had received a message. That's strange, I thought. That never happens. I checked the message, and it was from my mom. It was quite a jumble of numbers and letters, but through the vocabulary stew, I could make out the legible phrase. Please help me. It should go without saying that this worried me greatly, so I immediately replied, Are you okay? Just as instantly as I got another text which read, Oops, pocket text. I sighed with all the relief I had and continued to prepare myself. A few minutes later I received yet another message, and this time it was from my dad. So I checked the text, and once again it was a massive mixture of letters and numbers with the phrase, Please help me, concealed within. Creepy as this was, my dad was always a joker, so I presumed he was just joking around, until I was sent another text saying, Oops, pocket text. Now this sparked panic. Pure, unmistakable panic. Exactly half a minute passed when I received the exact same message from my sister. This could not be coincidental. It just couldn't. In a state of sheer anxiety, I started to run to the restaurant. I made it about a quarter of the way before I was stopped by a police officer. Main road's closed, he said. Huge car crash. This was the exact moment I realized just what had happened. I demanded to see the wreckage as a request. I'm surprised I was allowed. When I got there, it wasn't the remnants of the car that caught my eye, nor the flames billowing from the destroyed vehicle. No, I was horrified to see the lifeless corpses of my mother, father, and sister. I asked for the estimated time of death. and all three of them were killed instantly by the collision at 5:32. When I was a kid, I would race up to the top of the stairs as fast as I could, like it was some sort of silly game. Well, I must have been 5 or 6 at the time. I'm not sure, but I know I was very little. Somewhere along the way, a voice at the top of the stairs started to whisper to me. It would make bets with me such as, "I bet you a penny you can't make it to the top of the stairs." I don't really think there was a certain amount of time or anything. As I said, I was pretty little, so I probably didn't have any counting abilities anyway. I recall just sitting at the top of the stairs having conversations with this voice, about the betting, of course. Eventually, the voice, it was like a whisper of a man's voice, not my own in my head, started to bet me my life. Instead of pennies, it would say, "I bet you your life you can't make it up the stairs." As I got older, it stopped. I never really thought about it at all. I never mentioned it to anyone, until one night I was sleeping over at my brother's place, and we were talking about spooky stories. Out of nowhere, I brought up the voice at the top of the stairs, and my brother got all quiet. Before I even mentioned anything, he said, "Did it make bets with you too?" We both looked at each other, horrified. One night, a man lay dying on his sick bed. His wife left him with a nurse and went into the next room to take a rest. She sat in the dark, staring out the window into the night. Suddenly, the woman saw bright headlights speeding up the driveway of their house. "Oh no," she thought, "I don't want visitors now. Not now." But it wasn't a car bringing a visitor. It was an old hearse with maybe half a dozen strange little men hanging on the sides. At least that's what it looked like. The hearse screeched to a stop. The men jumped off and stared up at her, their eyes glowing with a soft yellow light, like cat's eyes. She watched with horror as they disappeared into the house. An instant later, they were back, lifting something into the hearse. Then, they drove off at a high speed, wheels squealing, sending the gravel in the driveway flying in all directions. At that very moment, the nurse came into the room. Her face was pale, and she laid her hand gently on the woman's shoulder and told her that her husband had just died. There was a single mother who had 3 daughters. The youngest daughter was diagnosed with an inoperable brain tumor. The doctors broke the bad news to her mother. They told the poor woman that her daughter had only 3 months to live. The family were devastated by the horrible news. The mother decided to have a family photo taken while her youngest daughter was still alive. That way, they would always have something to remember her by. They hired a professional photographer to come and take the photo. The family posed with the youngest daughter sitting in the middle of the picture, and her mother and oldest sisters arranged around her. Afterwards, they had it framed and hung over the fireplace in the living room. 3 months later, the youngest daughter died in hospital. Her mother and her 2 sisters were at her bedside when she passed away. The funeral took place 2 days later. After the funeral, the mother was sitting in the living room when she happened to glance up at the family photo over the fireplace. She was horrified to discover that her daughter's face in the photo was shifting and changing. It looked distended and deformed, almost demonic. They brought the family photo to the professional photographer and complained. He said he had no explanation for why the photo would suddenly change, making the dead child appear so grotesque. The mother was at her wit's end. She took the family photo to a psychic and begged the psychic to tell her what was wrong. The psychic took one look at the family photo and recoiled in horror. "I'm sorry to have to tell you this," said the psychic. "Unfortunately, your daughter has fallen into hell."